A Tuesday Mysterious, The Haunted House by Ron Roy. Chapter 1. Oh my gosh, Ding cried. There's a ghost in Green Lawn. Donald David Duncan, Ding to his friend, was reading the Sunday newspaper on his living room floor. Josh was sprawled on the sofa. He was using raisins to teach Ding's guinea pig, Loretta, to do math. Loretta gobbled up one of the raisins. Loretta, Josh scolded, if you keep eating all the raisins, you'll never learn to add. Red Rose was doing the crossword puzzle. Maybe she's trying to teach you to subtract, Joshua, she said. Josh tossed a raisin at her. I'm serious, you guys, Ding said. He poked his finger at the Green Lawn Gazette front page. Come here, and read this. Red Rose glanced at the newspaper. Hey, that's Mr. Linklater, she yelled. Josh put Loretta in her cage, then read the headline over Ding's shoulder. Haunted Hotel. Ghost scares away Shangri-La guest. See, I told you, Ding said. Josh grinned. You don't really believe that stuff, do you? He asked. I'll bet it's a Halloween joke or something. Yeah, well, Mr. Linklater looks pretty unhappy in this picture, Ding said, and he never tells jokes. Besides, Halloween isn't for 2 more weeks, Bruce Rose added. Josh snorted. Well, I don't believe in ghosts, he said, not until I see one with my own eyes. Listen to these, Ding said, reading from the paper. Guest reports seeing a ghost floating down the hall at midnight. It was carrying a silver sword. Josh snorted again. Ghosts don't carry swords, he said. Red Rose reached for a jacket. Why don't we go to the hotel and see for ourselves? Great idea, Ding said, pulling on his sneaker. Josh let out a big sigh. Okay, but I'm only coming to prove that I'm right. The kid left Ding's house and headed around Silver Circle. A bunch of kids were playing soccer at the elementary school. Their noses were pink and Ding could see their breath. The trees surrounding the playground playing field had turned red and gold. On Main Street, a long banner hung between 2 telephone poles. Big letters spelled out the word, Green Lawn welcomes you to Fall Foliage Week, October 13-20. Come see our colors. The kid stopped across the street from the Shangri-La Hotel. Look, Ding said. People logging suitcases were streaming out of the hotel. One woman was still wearing her slippers. They were pink and fluffy, with floppy bunny ears. A newspaper reporter was trying to interview people as they left the hotel. Hello, sir, she said to one man. I'm Linda Kumax from the Green Lawn Gazette. What's your reaction to the hotel ghost? No comment, the man snapped and hurried away. Let's get her to interview us, Josh whispered. Maybe we'll get our names in the paper. We don't know anything yet, Ding said. Come on, let's find Mr. Linklater. The kid crossed the street and squeezed through the crowded door. Way inside, Mr. Linklater was standing behind the front desk, listening to a man and woman. And we demand our money back, the woman was saying. We came here to see Autumn leave, not to be frightened by a ghost. Mr. Linklater sighed. Ding noticed that his hair was mussed and his eyes were red. Of course, Mrs. Carruthers, he said. You'll get a refund for the entire week. I'm sorry for this trouble. We'll never have ghosts at the Shangri-La. Dragging their suitcase, the couple hurried past the kids and shoved through the doors. Boy, they look mad, Josh said. Let's go talk to Mr. Linklater, Ding said. Just then the phone rang. Mr. Linklater turned to answer it. Wait, there's Livy, Rose said. I wonder if she knows anything. Livy Nugent was vacuuming the carpet near the elevators. She wore a white uniform with a dark blue apron. Hi, Livy, Rose said. Livy smiled and switched off the vacuum. Rose, the last time I saw you, there was a kidnapping at the hotel. Now we got a ghost. We read about it in the newspaper, Rose said. Is it true? The guest sure thinks so, Levy said. This place has been a madhouse since Friday night, our biggest week of the year, and the guests are running out the door. Josh smirked. Does the ghost jump out and say boo? He asked. Josh doesn't believe in ghosts, Rose said. Do you? Livy asked her. Rose shrugged. I don't know, but something's scaring the people away. Did you see the ghost? Dink asked. Livy shook her head. No, and I better not. When ghosts show up, I'm out of here. Just then, Mr. Linklater hung up the phone and walked over. Miss Nogant, please continue with your work, he said to Livy. Then he turned to the kids. What can I do for you children? We read about the ghost, Dink said. Josh rolled his eyes. And we saw all the people leaving, Rose said. Mr. Linklater said I surveyed the lobby. All the guests had left and the place was empty. Mr. Linklater sighed. Apparently, a ghost is scaring away our guests, he said. Maybe we can help, Dink said. Remember how we found Wallace when you thought she was kidnapped? I never forget, Mr. Linklater said. He looked at the three kids. His thin mustache twitched, his sad eyes squinted. Finally he said, Follow me, please. He turned and marched away. Chapter 2. Mr. Linklater led the kid to his office. The room was small, with just a desk and 3 chairs. On one wall hung a painting of the hotel. A framed picture of an elderly couple stood on the desk. Please sit down, Mr. Linklater said. The kid sat. Mr. Linklater opened a desk drawer and took out a paper bag. Mint? He asked. Each of the kids took a mint from the bag and popped it into their mouth. Mr. Linklater looked inside the bag, then popped a mint into his mouth too. He sank back into his chair. This is terrible, he said. Mine tastes okay, Josh said. I think it's lemon. Rose nudged Josh. I think he means the ghost, she said. Josh blushed. Oh, sorry. As I was saying, Mr. Linklater went on, it all started 2 days ago, on Friday. It was almost midnight. I was closing my office when a ghost ran into the lobby. She was yelling about a ghost on the 3rd floor. Did she say what the ghost looked like? Dink asked. Mr. Linklater smoothed his hair. She said it was all white, except for the black holes where its eyes should have been. The 3 kids looked at each other. Josh's mouth was hanging open. Mr. Linklater rubbed his temples as if he had a headache. Anyway, he went on, that guest checked out last night. More guests saw the ghost again. It appeared at midnight today at all those guests checked out. Mr. Linklater shook his head. This ghost is ruining our business. Did any of the guests say where the ghost went after they saw it? Rose asked. Apparently, it just floats away and disappears, he answered. Did you see the ghost too? Dink asked. No, I went upstairs, but all I saw was a dozen terrified guests. Mr. Linklater picked up the picture of the elderly couple up on his desk. This is my aunt and uncle Florence and Ebenezer Spivet. They've owned this Shangri-La ever since they were just married, 47 years ago. He looked at the kids. They're very worried. I don't know what will happen to the hotel if this ghost business continue. For a minute, nobody said anything. Finally, Mr. Linklater stood up. Now, if you'll excuse me, he said, I have to tell my aunt and uncle that this Shangri-La hotel won't be having a foliage week this year. The kid thanked Mr. Linklater and headed back out into the lobby. Guys, we're gotta do something, Dink whispered. But what can we do? Rose asked. Just then Livy hurried over to them. What's he say? She asked. He told us about the ghost, Rose said. She described it for Livy. So there really is a ghost in the hotel? Livy said. She looked nervously over her shoulder. What's Mr. Linklater gonna do? I don't know, Dink answered. He looked at Josh and Rose, but we're gonna try to help, right? Good luck, Livy said. I'll be down in my cubbyhole eating lunch. She opened a small door next to the elevator and disappeared. How are we supposed to help? Josh asked Dink. We don't know anything about ghosts. Well, I know one thing, Dink said. No ghost is shutting down the Shangri-La if I have anything to do with it. Think is right, Rose said. Mr. Linklater is our friend, but you have to think of something. Suddenly, the elevator door opened, a figure in a white suit staring out at them. It's the ghost, Josh screamed. Chapter 3. The three kids stood frozen at the elevator door slid shut again. For a minute later, no one moved. Then Rose reached over and punched up button for the elevator. What you doing? Josh squeaked. Following the ghost, she said. Are you crazy? Josh said. What if the ghosts don't like it? Gee, Josh, Ding said. I thought you didn't believe in ghosts. Unless I see one with my own eyes, Josh said, and I just did. Let's get out of here. The elevator door opened. Too late, Josh, Ding said. He and Rose pulled Josh into the elevator with them. Ding pushed the button marked 2. We'll check each floor, he said. When the door opened on the second floor, the hallway was empty. 2 more floors, Rose said, pushing the number 3 button. But they didn't see the ghost on 3rd or 4th floor either. There are no more floors, Ding said, looking at the panel of buttons. Good, let's go home, Josh said. What this one for? Rose asked, pointing to a black button without a number. Maybe you push it for emergencies, Ding said. She shook her head. Nope, this red one says emergency. Ding shrugged. There's only one way to find out, he said. He pushed the black button. The elevator creaked, then slowly started moving up. I'm having a nightmare, Josh mumbled. I'm not really chasing a ghost around the hotel. Any minute, I'm gonna wake up in bed. Don't worry, Josh, Rose said with a grin. I'll protect you. The elevator stopped with a gentle thud. When the door opened, the ghost was waiting for them. It followed us, Josh screamed, jumping behind Rose. No, you followed me, the ghost said. What do you want? Behind the white figure, a door opened. A stooped, gray-haired man stepped into the hall. The ghost pointed a thin finger at the kids. They followed me up here, Ebenezer. The man chuckled and shuffled toward the open elevator. Well, perhaps we should keep them. No, Josh yelled from behind Rose. Please let us go. If you kill me, I'll be grounded for sure. Ding stared at the figure in white. Where had he been that face before? Suddenly he remembered. She was the woman in the picture on Mr. Linklater's desk. Ding stepped out of the elevator. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Spivet, he said. I'm Ding Duncan, and these are my friend, Josh and Rose. How you do? The man said, peering at Ding. His eyes were the color of blueberries. You must be the 3 children our nephew told us about. Josh peeked at Mr. Spivet from behind Rose. You mean she's not the ghost? He asked. Of course, I'm not the ghost, Mrs. Spivet said. Ebenezer, shall we invite these 3 in for cookies? Of course, my love, the old man smiled at the kids. Come along, kiddos. The kid followed. Mr. and Mrs. Spivet through a small hallway and into an old-fashioned parlor. Sunlight poured into the room. Through tall windows, the kid could see treetops across Main Street. Ding could look across the room. The walls were covered with paintings, and he never seen so many books. Mrs. Spivet came in, carrying a tray. Please sit, she told the kid. She handed each of them a glass of milk. Her husband bustled in with a cookie jar shaped like a rooster. He pulled off the rooster's head. Cookie, he said. Each of the kids took one cookie. Now then, Mr. Spivet said as he sat next to his wife, what are you kids up to? We read about a ghost in the newspaper, Rose said. And we came to see it, Ding said. But we didn't, Josh added. Then Mr. Linklater told us how the ghost is ruining the hotel's business, Rose continued, so we decided to investigate. Mrs. Spivet stared at the kid. Investigate? She said. Like detectives? Right, Ding said. Did you see the ghost? Yes, Mrs. Spivet. She looked at her husband. No, but we heard it, haven't we, dear? He nodded. 2 nights in a row, dreadful noises coming from the walls, and a voice calling out my name. Ebenezer, it said. Go away, go away. Josh gulped. It knew your name? The voice spoke to me too, Mrs. Spivet said. It said, Flo, leave this place. She began to cry into a lace hanky. Mr. Spivet patted his wife's hand. We just made a difficult decision, he told the kids. We're going to sell the hotel. Some real estate company in New York want to buy it. Shall they sing Shangri-La? They blurted. But you can't, Rose said. We were going to leave this Shangri-La to our new nephew, Mrs. Spivet said. But now it looks as if the hotel will go to each, Real and Rook, Mr. Spivet said. Who are they? Rose asked. They're the three partners in the real estate company, Mr. Spivet said. They've been after us to sell for a month. He crossed to a small desk and pulled out a letter. They want to tear down the Shangri-La and build a high-rise in its place, he said. Mr. Spivet placed the letter on the tea tray. Mrs. Spivet and I don't want to sell, but we don't know what else to do. Somehow we feel as if we failed our guest. He looked down at his wife. I telephoned the real estate people this morning. They will be here tomorrow with papers for us to sign. Mrs. Spivet looked up. Her eyes were red. Isn't there anything else we can do? She asked. Ebenezer Spivet took his wife's hand in his. I will do anything for you, dear, but I'm too old to figure ghosts. Well, we're not, Ding said, springing to his feet. We'll find a ghost and get rid of it, too. He looked at Josh and Rose. Right, guys? Right, Rose said. Mr. Spivet beamed. You're hired, he said. Josh groaned. Can I have another cookie? He asked. Chapter 4. How are we gonna get rid of a ghost? Josh asked in the elevator. Even if I did believe in it, I don't know yet, Ding answered. But we can't let those real estate guys tear down the Shangri-La. The elevator door slid open. Mr. Linklater was standing behind his desk, just staring into space. Let's go to my house, Ding whispered. We can make a plan while we eat. Yes, Josh said. Those cookies weren't big enough to fill up a flea. Ding laughed. Not everyone has a stomach like the Grand Canyon, Josh. They headed up Main Street, then followed Silver Circle around the school to Ding's house. Ding got out the peanut butter and bread. Josh found a bag of pretzels. Rose poured milk for everyone. Make my sandwich extra fat, Josh ordered. I'm fainting from hunger. Ding pushed the peanut butter and bread toward Josh. I'm not your servant, your Royal Highness. Josh grinned and began building a sandwich. Okay, Ding said, sitting at the table. How do you get rid of a ghost? First, you have to prove that there is one, Josh said, taking a big bite of his sandwich. You still don't believe there's a ghost at the hotel? Rose asked. Josh swallowed and shook his head. Nope. He lined up 4 pretzels on the table. We talked to Levy, but she hadn't seen the ghost, Josh said. He picked up a pretzel and ate it. Then we asked Mr. Linklater if he'd seen the ghost, but he said he hadn't. Josh ate another pretzel. He picked up the last 2 pretzels. Me and Mr. Spivet didn't see the ghost either. They just heard noises. Josh popped the pretzel into his mouth. Guys, he said as he chewed. Nobody. We talked to saw the ghost, so maybe there's no ghost. Ding and Rose stared at Josh. He's right, Rose said after a minute. Everyone we talked to said someone else had been the ghost. So what shall we do? Ding asked. We have to see the ghost for ourselves, Rose said. Ding blinked. But how do we do that? He asked. Josh licked peanut butter from his finger. Well, we could start by finding someone who really did see the ghost. But everyone who saw it checked out of the hotel, Rose said. Ding swallowed the last of the sandwich. We have to talk to those people, he said. Maybe Mr. Linklater will help us. Good idea, Rose said. Let's go back to the hotel. No dessert? Josh asked. Wipe off your milk mustache and come on, Ding said. The kids hurried back to the hotel. Mr. Linklater looked up as the kids came in. I heard you had a chat with my aunt and uncle, he said. They hired us to get rid of the ghost, Ding informed him. The corners of Mr. Linklater's mouth wiggled. It was almost a smile. And do you have a plan? Sort of, Rose said, but we need the names and phone numbers of the guests who saw the ghost. Mr. Linklater shook his head. Sorry, our guests, even the one who leave, pay for privacy. Well, are there any guests left at all? She asked. Mr. Linklater pointed to a man and woman reading in a corner of the lobby. Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers haven't checked out, but I don't know if they saw the ghost. Let's go and ask them, Dink said. He headed across the lobby. The man was wearing jeans, hiking boots, and a white sweater. The woman had black hair and wore a dark blue sweater and faded jeans. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Jervers, Dink said. My name is Dink. These are my friend, Josh and Rose. We're investigating the ghost. Did you see it? Why do you want to know? The man asked. Because the hotel owners have hired us to get rid of it, Rose said. If there really is a ghost, Josh muttered. There is, Mrs. Jeffers said. It scared me half to death. So you saw it? Then asked. We both did, Mr. Jeffers said, setting down his book. Last night we played cards down here until about midnight. When we went up to our room, this thing appeared out of nowhere. Mrs. Jeffers shuddered. The hallway seemed to grow cold, she said. What did it look like? Rose asked. Mr. Jeffers closed his eyes. The ghost kind of shimmered as she walked. She had wild-looking white hair and a low, glowing robe. And black holes instead of eyes, Mrs. Jeffers said it. You said she, Rose said. Was that a girl ghost? Mr. Jeffers looked at Rose. Well, I guess so. At least the robe looked like a woman's. And you said the ghost walked. Then said, did it have feet? Feet? Mr. Jeffers said. I'm not sure. We hurried right into our room. Just then, Mr. Linklater came over to the sofa. Excuse me, Dink, he said. My uncle is on the phone. Mr. Spivet want to talk to me? Dink said. Mr. Linklater nodded. Dink followed him to the phone. Hello? Dink said. He listened for a few minutes, then hung up and walked back to Josh and Rose. You're not gonna believe this, he said. Don't tell me that you saw the ghost, Josh said. Nope, but now we might, Dink said. Mr. Spivet wants us to sleep in the hotel tonight. Chapter 5. Josh and Rose stared at Dink. Honest, Dink said. But why? Rose asked. Since the whole hotel is almost empty, he said we've been doing him a favor, Dink said. If people see us here, they might think the ghost was just a joke. Let's do it, Josh said. I need a night away from the twins. Dink grinned. Mr. Spivet invited our families too, and he wants us to investigate the ghost while we're here. Josh laughed. When my little brothers get here, the dead ghost better watch out. By supper time, it was all arranged. The three families will spend the night at the Shangri-La. Rose's little brother Nate wanted to meet the ghost. He'll be my friend, Nate said. We can play with my dinosaur together. Dink's family and Rose's family rode together in one car. The Pinto's car was already in the parking lot. When they arrived, Josh was holding on to the twin brothers, Brian and Bradley. The boys hugged twin teddy bear. After logging the cars, all 12 of them trooped it into the Shangri-La. Mr. and Mrs. Spivet were waiting in the lobby. They were all dressed up as if it was a special occasion. Good evening, all, Mr. Spivet said. Welcome to the Shangri-La. The dolls shook hands. This is very nice of you, Dink's mom told them. Mr. Spivet smiled at the kids. It's the least we can do. These three detectives are going to get to the bottom of the ghost business tonight. Dink's father grinned. As long as they do it before bedtime, Dad, Dink said, rolling his eyes. Just then, Mr. Linklater joined them. Where's Casper? Where's Casper? Nate asked him. I want to see the ghost. Mr. Linklater blinked at Nate, then handed room keys to Dink, Josh, and Rose. I think you'll find the room comfortable, he said. I had rollaway bed brought in for the little ones. Dink led them all to the elevator. What number do you guys have? Josh asked. We're in room 203. I'm across the hall, Rose said, in 204. Me too, Dink said. 202. 5 minutes later, all three families were in their rooms. Dink dumped his backpack on a narrow rollaway bed. The room was pretty big, with a color TV and a miniature refrigerator. Dink opened the door and found a bunch of soft drink and snacks. Can we eat this stuff? Dink asked. His father gave him a look. You just finished supper, Dingo. Dink grinned. Yeah, I know. How late can I stay up? 9 o'clock, his mother said. Remember, tomorrow is Monday. Mom, tomorrow is Columbus Day, Dink said, grinning. No school. Okay, 10 o'clock, but not a minute later. Dink left the room and knocked on Josh's door. Come in, one of the twins yelled. Dink opened the door. The Pinto's room was even bigger than his. Three small beds were lined up opposite one big one. Brian and Bradley wore matching Batman jammies and were coloring in their coloring books. Josh was standing in front of their little fridge, tossing down peanuts. Can Josh come out and play? Dink said, grinning. Josh's dad said, Sure, just be back by breakfast time. Josh laughed. Let's get Rose, he said to Dink. They walked to room 204 and knocked. Rose opened the door and stepped out. My folks are trying to get Nate to go to bed, she whispered. Let's go down to the lobby and think of a plan, Dink suggested. I already have one, Rose announced. You do? Dink said. Rose nodded. Mr. Linkletter told us the ghost showed up at midnight, right? Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers said the same thing. Josh nodded. So what's your plan, to hang out and say hi to the ghost when the clock strikes 12? Rose grinned. Exactly. Chapter 6. It smells awful in here, Josh muttered. Josh, this closet is filled with cleaning stuff, Dink told him. It's supposed to smell awful. Could you guys whisper? Rose said. You want our parents to wake up and find us gone? It was nearly midnight, 10 minutes before the kids had snuck out of their rooms and hidden in the closet. Josh yawned. I shall be asleep having a great dreams, he said. Instead, I'm squashed in here like a sardine waiting for a dumb ghost who isn't even real. Dink grinned in the dark. I heard that ghosts eat kids with red hair, he whispered. Yeah, well, I heard that ghosts eat blonde-haired kids for breakfast. Suddenly, Rose put on both hands. Shh, I think I heard something, she said. Josh snorted. Nice try, Rose, but shh, whispered Dink. I heard something too. He pushed the closet door open a crack. All three with kids peered out into the hallway. Dink heard a groan, like the wind howling through a cave. Suddenly, a tall white figure appeared at the end of the hall. It gave off a shimmery white light and seemed to float above the floor. Oh my gosh, Josh croaked. I wanna go back to bed. The ghost wore a long white gown. Its head was white and stuck up in spikes, and there were just black, empty holes where the eyes should have been. Josh grabbed Dink's arm. It hurt, but Dink was too scared to say anything. The figure drifted slowly towards the kid's hiding place. It was carrying a long silver sword. It knows we're in here, Josh squeaked. The ghost paused at the door, then stopped in front of room 202. That's our room, Dink thought. Dink. The ghost moaned. Go home. This place is dangerous. Every hair on Dink's head stood up. He felt cold, as if someone had opened a window. The ghost floated to the restroom. This time it moaned, Josh, go home. Leave before it's too late. Outside room 204, the ghost moaned its final message. Rose, take your family and leave now. Then the ghost drifted back the way it had come. A second later, the hallway was empty. Rose jumped up and shoved the door. Come on, let's see where it went, she said. Who cares where it went, Josh said. I'm out of here. Come on, Josh, Dink said. I promise Mr. and Mrs. Bivet will get rid of the ghost, and we only have till morning. But what if it gets rid of us instead? Dink grabbed Josh's arm and started down the hall. He stopped and listened at room 202. He heard his father snoring and grinned. Suddenly, Josh snuck his nose in the air. What a smell, he said. Dink shrugged and kept walking. Rose had reached the end of the hall. It disappeared, she said, when they were sitting together. I smell it too. Here too, Josh said. Smell what? Rose asked. I don't know, Josh said, but it reminds me of something. Around the corner, the kid found a gray metal door. A red sign on the door read fire exit. Maybe it went through there, Rose whispered, pointing at the floor. Dink held his breath, then slowly pushed the door open. The kid peered into the stairwell. They saw dark steps going up and down. Shall we split up and check it out? Dink asked. No, wait, Josh said. We stick together. Dink grinned at his friend. Still think the ghost is a joke? Josh made a face at Dink. Guys, First Rose said, how did the ghost know our names and which room we were in? Maybe it has supernatural powers, Josh said. Or maybe the ghost is really someone in the hotel, Dink added. Someone who knows us. First Rose nodded. I think the ghost came out tonight looking just for us. You mean to scare us away like it did the other people? Dink asked. First Rose nodded again. Well, it worked, Josh said. Let's hit the trail. Hey, what this? Rose asked. She plucked a white hair off the door frame. Then examined the hair. The ghost had white hair like this, he said. Yeah, Rose said, but ghost doesn't lose the hair. People do. Suddenly the door to room 204 opened. Rose's father popped his head out. Okay, you guys, time to eat the snack. But Dad, we just... Rose said. Her father shook his head. Say goodnight to the boys, Rose. Now. Chapter 7. By 9 the next morning, the three families were down in the lobby. Rose's parents had treated them all to breakfast at Alice's diner. Then they walked back to the hotel for their luggage, while the adult things Mr. Linklater and the Spivet, the kids huddled on the sofa. What we gonna do? Dink asked. Mr. and Mrs. Spivet are selling the hotel today. Rose pulled a white hair from her pocket. This proves that someone is just pretending to be the ghost, she said, but we don't know who or why. Maybe one of the guests has white hair, Josh said. Josh, all the guests are gone except me, Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, and they both have dark hair, Rose reminded him. Could there be from a wig? Dink asked. The ghost could have been wearing a costume and makeup. That's it, Josh cried. Last night I smelled makeup in the hall. I remember the yucky smell from last Halloween. Just then, Mr. Linklater walked over the kids. He looked even more unhappy than he had the day before. This is a sad day, Mr. Linklater said. Each Braille and Rue will be here at noon with the papers. Noon? Rose jumped up. Then we still have 3 hours. Mr. Linklater gazed down at her. I'm afraid it's too late. He shook his head and walked away. We have to find out who's pretending to be the ghost, Rose said. If we don't, Livy and Mr. Linklater will lose their jobs, and Mr. and Mrs. Spivet will lose their home. Dink added. Guys, I think I know who the ghost is, Josh said. Dink and Rose stared at him. Well, Dink said. Who? The only person left in the hotel are Livy, Mr. Linklater, and his aunt and uncle, right? Right, Rose said, and we know that none of them want the hotel to be torn down, Josh continued. You forget about Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, Dink said. They're still here, Josh grinned. Bingo. The Jefferses? Rose said. But they said they saw the ghost outside their room. Sure they saw the ghost, Josh said. One of them is the ghost. I know how we can find out, Dink said. We have to search their room. Mr. Linklater will never let us do that, Josh said. Well, maybe he won't let us, but I know someone who might, Rose said. Who? Asked Dink. Levy. The kids said goodbye to their family, then hurried to the door that led to the basement. They found Livy in a cozy room, drinking a cup of tea. She was wearing her maid's uniform. Morning, kid, she said. What brings you down here? We saw the ghost last night, Rose said. Livy's eyes widened. Really? Where? Tell me. The kid explained about spending the night in the hotel and hiding in the cleaning closet. It was so creepy, George said. First we heard all these weird noises. Then this thing came out of nowhere. It glowed, Rose said. She showed Livy the white hair, and we found this. We think the costume is one of the guests wearing a costume and wig, Dink explained. Suddenly Livy let out a gasp. It was a wig, she cried. Was that? What was? Rose asked. I just remembered, Livy said. Yesterday I was in 301, we're getting ready to vacuum. When I looked under the bed for shoes and stuff, I saw this hairy white thing. I thought it was a rat, but it could have been a white wig. Who's in room 301? Dink asked. Livy shrugged. I don't know their name, but they're a nice couple from New York. Could you let us in so we could check the room for clues? Rose asked. Livy shook her head. Sorry, but you know how Mr. Linkletter is about the guest's privacy? But Mr. and Mrs. Spivet hired us to get rid of the ghost, Dink said. Besides, if they have to sell the hotel, you and Mr. Linkletter will lose your jobs, and Mr. and Mrs. Spivet will have to move, Rose said. Please, Livy, it won't take us long. Livy took a moment to think. Okay, she finally said, but just for 2 minutes. Hey, what's this? Josh had stuck his head into a small opening in one wall. That's an old dumbwaiter, Livy explained. In the old days, the hotel sent food for the guests. Each room had one of these little elevator things. When the food got up there, the guests just opened the door and pulled out their food tray. Our room didn't have one, Ding said. None of them do anymore, Livy said. When the hotel closed its kitchen, the dumbwaiters were all sealed up. She pointed to the one in her wall. That's the only hole left. George stuck his head back into the opening. Cool, this thing goes way up. Right, Livy explained. The shaft is still there, but the opening into the room were covered over. Josh yelled, hello, into the empty shaft. His voice came echoing back. Livy finished her tea. Okay, let's go, she said. I'll be glad when Mr. Linkletter is back to normal again. He's even grouchier than usual. Livy took the kids up to the 3rd floor, then knocked at room 301. When no one answered, she unlocked the door and pushed it open. Please don't touch anything, she said. She knelt down and peeked under both beds. The wig's gone. The kid looked around the room. Maybe it's in the closet, Rose whispered. Livy pulled open the closet door. On the top shelf sat a plastic head wearing a spiky white wig. That's it, Josh said. Can you take it down? Dink asked. Livy carefully took the head down and set it on the table. Rose removed the white hair from her pocket and held it next to the wig. The hairs are the same, she said. Chapter 8. Look, Dink pointed to a small frame picture on the bedside table. Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, you know this people? Livy asked. We met them yesterday, Rose said. We think one of them might be the ghost. Livy's eyes grew wide. Why will they want to scare the guests away? They seem so nice. That's what we plan to find out, Dink said. Livy carefully placed the wig back on the closet shelf. As she stepped back, her arm caught on something. A long silver object clung on the floor. It's a ghost sword, Rose said. She picked it up and laughed. It's just plain wood. Painted wood. Guys, look at this stuff. Josh had been examining some tubes and bottles on a vanity table. Look, white clothes, makeup, and black. That is what I smelled in the hallway last night. Hey guys, a tape recorder, Rose said. Kids, please don't touch. Before Livy could answer, Rose had pushed the play button. Suddenly, the room was filled with spooky noises. Livy and the kids listened as a voice moaned and groaned. Those are the same noises we heard last night, Dink said. Have you seen Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers this morning? Rose asked Livy. Livy shook her head. Maybe they went out for breakfast. She looked at her watch. And I was very busy. Livy looked at the door behind them, and they all got in the elevator. Thanks for letting us in, Rose said to Livy. Livy put on one finger to her lips. Let's keep this a secret, okay? She whispered. From you know who. It's a deal, Rose whispered back. The elevator door opened, and Livy left the kids in the lobby. There's Mr. Linkletter, Josh said. Maybe he knows where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers went. The kids walked over to the front desk. Mr. Linkletter looked at as if he hadn't been to bed. His suit was rumpled and his hair stuck up in the back. Maybe we shouldn't disturb him, Rose whispered. But we have to find Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, Dink said. We don't have much more time. Dink walked up to the desk and put on his best smile. Hi, Mr. Linkletter. Mr. Linkletter gazed down at Dink. Oh, hello, he said. Do you happen to know where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers were this morning? He asked. Mr. Linklater waved his hand toward the door. They told me they were going to Alice for breakfast. Thanks, Mr. Linklater, Ding said. The kid left the hotel and hurried up Main Street toward Alice's diner. What are we gonna say to them? Josh asked. We can just walk up and accuse them for being the ghost, can we? Red Rose pushed open the door to the diner. Don't worry, she said. I have a plan. Ellie was behind the counter mixing tuna salad in a big bowl. She waved as the kids sat in one of the booths. There they are, Josh whispered. He nodded his head toward another booth, where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers were eating breakfast. They look so nice, Ting said. Not like people who will try to row in a hotel. Ellie came to their booth. Back so soon? She asked, opening her pad. Don't tell me you're having another breakfast. Can I borrow your pad and pencil? Rich Rose asked. Ellie gave Rich Rose a sly smile and handed them over. What are you kids up to? She asked. I'll give them back in a minute, Rich Rose said. Okie dokie, I'll see you in a minute then, Ellie said, heading back to her tuna salad. Rich Rose began writing. What are you doing? Josh asked. Wait a sec, Rich Rose said. She finished and pushed the pad in front of Dink and Josh. What do you think? They're Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers. We know all about the white wig and the tape recorder. Guess who? Ruth Rose, what if we're wrong about the Jefferses? Dink asked. We're not wrong, Ruth Rose said. Getting up, she walked over to Ellie and something to her and handed her the pad. Ellie smiled at Ruth Rose, then handed for the Jefferses booth. Miss Rose hurried back and sat down. Now watch, she told Dink and Josh. They watched as Allie handed the note to Mrs. Jeffers. Mr. Jeffers read the note, then said something to Allie. Allie pointed towards the kid. Mrs. Jeffers waved, and Miss Rose waved back. Come on, Miss Rose said. She walked over to the Jeffers' booth. Dink and Josh were right behind her. Hi, Miss Rose said, pulling the white hair from her pocket. I think your wig got caught on the fryer door last night. You left this. She placed the white hair on the green placemat. Mrs. Jeffers stared at the hair, then at the kid. Finally, she looked at her husband. Mr. Jeffers sighed, then grinned at the kid. Looks like you got us, he said. Chapter 9. So, you are really the ghost? Rich Rose asked. Mr. Jeffers nodded. That was me last night, he said. Cindy here was the ghost the first 2 nights. He looked at the kid. Weren't you asleep in your room when I came by? We hid in a smelly closet and saw you, Josh said. Mr. Jeffers smiled. Do I make a good ghost? You sure scared me, Josh said. But why did you do it? Rich Rose asked. We're both actors, and we're broke, Mr. Jeffers said. A few weeks ago, 3 men came up to us after a rehearsal and asked if we wanted a job. So we told them sure, her husband said. The men told us to check into the Shangri-La and scared the guests away. We came up with the ghost costume ourselves. How do you make it glow? Josh asked. I glued a string of tiny lights inside the gown. Mr. Jeffers said the battery was under the wig. Her husband smiled, and I thought of hiding the tape recorder in the basement. Dumbwaiter, the noise went all through the hotel walls. But that's so mean, Rose said. If the hotel closes, that will happen to Mr. Linklater and Levy and Mr. and Mrs. Spivett. Mr. Jefferson put up his hand. Who said anything about hotel closing? Mr. and Mrs. Spivett did. Ding said, they're selling the hotel because of you. What? Mrs. Jeffers said. But Mr. and Mrs. Spivett are supposed to know all about the Ghost Act. So is Mr. Linklater. Look, said Mr. Jeffers, the 3 guys who hired us told us that the hotel is going to be used in a horror movie. Scaring guests away is supposed to be great publicity. All the guests are going to get their money back, plus free passes to the movie. And we're supposed to get starting back in the movie, his wife said. It's a big break for us. The kids looked at each other. But Mr. and Mrs. Spivett don't know anything about any movie, Rose said. Neither does Mr. Linklater. They're really upset because they're going to have to sell the hotel today. Yeah, George said. Mrs. Spivett was crying and everything. We even saw the letter from the real estate company. Things said their names were supposed something like Peach or Roach. Eat, Real, and Rogue? Mr. Jeffers suddenly asked. That's them, Ding said. They've been trying to buy the hotel for a long time, but Mr. Spivett refused to sell until now. Mr. Jeffers looked at his wife. Oh no, he said. Eat, Real, and Rogue are the men who hired us. His wife had gone from happy to sad. No wonder they told us not to talk to Mr. Linkletter about the movie. Never was one. Her husband shook his head. All they wanted was the hotel, and we helped them get it. I felt terrible, Mrs. Jeffers said. She turned to her husband. Todd, isn't there anything we can do? Mr. Jeffers looked at the kid. Do you think it's too late? He asked. Have they actually sold the hotel yet? Think. Glanced at the clock over the counter. They're signing the paper at noon, he said, but I think I know how you can get rid of each, Rail and Rook, and save the hotel at the same time. Chapter 10. This week eaches, Josh complained. He, Dink, and Rose were hiding behind the desk in the hotel lobby. Josh was dressed as a ghost, complete with wig, robe, and makeup. It won't be long now, Dink said, glancing at the clock. It was almost noon. Each, Rail, and Rook had better hurry up, Josh said. I'm gonna suffocate in this dumb dress. From where he was hiding, Dink could see the rest of the lobby. Mr. Linkletter was sitting on the sofa with his aunt and uncle. On the other side of the lobby, Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers were playing cards with Linda Gomax, the reporter from the Green Lawn Gazette. Next to her sat a man with a camera. What if they don't come? Rose whispered. Dink smiled and pointed at the front door. I think they just did. The three men walked into the lobby. One was tall, one was medium, and one was short and round. Each was dressed in a dark suit, white suit and blue tie. They looked like three penguins, Josh said. Mr. Linkletter hurried over to the men, then led them back to his aunt and uncle. The tall man shook hands with Mr. Spivat. I am Fletcher Each, he said. I am Randolph Frail, the medium-sized man said, sticking out his hand. And I am Miles Rook, the short man said, shaking hand in turn. Mr. Spivat nodded at the man. Have you brought the papers? He asked. Fletcher each beamed. We certainly have, he said. We handed Mr. Spivat an important-looking document. Randolph Frail removed an envelope from his briefcase. And here's the check. Miles Rook whipped a gold pen out of his pocket. All we need is your signature, Mr. Spivat, he said. Mr. Spivat looked sadly at his wife. Then he took the pen and started to sign the document. Just then Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers walked up. Look, Todd, Mrs. Jeffers said. It's the movie producers. What a surprise, her husband said. We were just thinking about the movie you're going to film here in the hotel. Mr. Spivat paused. What about the movie? He asked suspiciously. Began Fletcher Each. Well, started Randolph Frail. We can explain, said Miles Rook. There's no need to explain, said Linda Gomax. She stood up and walked toward the man. I'm a reporter from the Green Lawn Gazette. Tomorrow my column will tell the whole town how you tried to trick these people into selling their hotel. The three men stared at Linda, then at the Jefferses. Finally their eyes landed on Mr. and Mrs. Spivat. Fletcher each turned pink. Randolph Frail went white. Miles Rook turned purple. There was dead silence in the Shangri-La lobby, and then a ghost in a spiky white wig floated up from behind the desk. Go home, it moaned in a creepy voice. Go home before it's too late. Everyone in the lobby except Each, Rail, and Rook started to laugh. I guess I won't be needing this, Mr. Spivat said. He ripped the documents he was holding into pieces. What are you doing? Fletcher each spluttered. You agreed to sell this hotel, Randolph Frail said. You can't back out of a deal with Each, Rail, and Rook, said Miles Rook. Mr. Spivat stood up next to her husband. Each, Rail, and Rook, she said. You should rearrange the letters in your name to cheat, liar, and crook. And now, Mr. Spivat said, I think it's time for you, gentlemen, to leave. Without another word, Mr. Linkletter escorted the three men to the front door. The man with the camera followed, snapping one picture after another. Everyone cheered. Flo Spivat cheered the loudest. Mr. Jeffers turned back to Mr. and Mrs. Spivat. My husband and I are so sorry for what we did, she said. Can you ever forgive us? Of course we can, dear, Mrs. Spivat said. In fact, said Mr. Spivat, you were such good ghosts, we'd like to invite you to do it again. One weekend a month, we'd like you to put on a Shangri-La mystery for our guests. What do you think? That's a great idea, Mr. Jeffers said. We can get some of our actor friends to help. The photographer snapped pictures of the Jefferses and the Spivats. Wait till my readers hear about this, Linda Gomez said, writing it all down on her pad. Then Mr. Spivet turned to Dink, Josh, and Rose. And speaking of mysteries, I want to thank our 3 super sleuths. He pulled 3 envelopes out of the pocket. From the bottom of our hearts, Mrs. Spivet, and I thank you, he said. He handed the envelopes to the kid. Please open this before you go to bed. The photographer snapped a picture as the kid blushed. Be sure to mention their names in the column. Mrs. Spivet said to Linda Gomez. My pleasure, Linda said. Now how about a few more pictures of the 3 kids? Dink and Rose looked into the camera and smiled. Wait, Josh said, struggling out of the ghost costume. I don't want my picture in the picture with the wig and dress on. Later that night, the kid met in Dink's living room. Dink was holding Loretta in his lap. She was nibbling on one of his shirt buttons. Josh pulled out the envelope Mr. Spivet had given them. Can we open this now? He asked. He said before we go to bed, Josh, Dink said. This is before we go to bed. Josh is right, Rose said. I'm dying to know what's in mine. Let's open them on the count of 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Oh, jolly, my great Aunt Molly, George said. 3 plane tickets to Florida. Rose held up the contest upper envelope. And 3 passes to Disney World. Then gulped when he saw what was in his envelope. He pulled out 3 $50 bills and a note. Thank you for stopping our hotel and solving another Shangri-La mystery. Say hi to Mickey and Goofy for us. Dink, Josh, and Rose jumped up and did a triple high five. Loretta crawled off the sofa. No one was looking, so she started chewing one of the $50 bill. So, today we already read this book. So thank you for listening to my channel. Bye bye everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.